Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nick Mueller, and I'm still the president and CEO of the National World War II Museum, since some of you have been here and seen me address you before. And welcome to all of our regulars, and as well as our newcomers to our lecture series and presentations that we have here at the National World War II Museum. It's just great to have you and to see the continued vitality of this program. And you're here tonight to receive a wonderful presentation, and it's also especially great to welcome C-SPAN to broadcast this evening's presentation and the discussion, which will be viewed far and wide. But before we start tonight's program, I'd like to ask if we have any World War II veterans here in the audience with us tonight. This is our tradition to recognize you. If you are here, please stand up. Or if you're standing, wave your hands. But do we have any World War II veterans here tonight? Here we have one right here. So. We're honored to have you here, sir, and honored by your presence. This is your museum, and of course you're a volunteer here too, so we're happy to have you with us. We also have some distinguished friends. General Sands, who's a frequent visitor. He's almost a regular. He could come up here and do my introduction. I think he's been here so many times, and a great friend of this museum. I think history professor and former Vice Chancellor Bobby DuPont, I see in the background, and was involved in the early years with launching this museum when we were still thinking it might one day be at the research park, and we got some sense into us and brought it downtown. Tonight's event is an outgrowth of a special relationship between the National World War II Museum and the University of New Orleans, which is the home to many fine programs in military history and public history. As some of you may know, Stephen Ambrose and I started this museum. I was an administrator and professor of history back from 1969 until I retired there in 2002. And we were colleagues at the University of New Orleans and had established the Eisenhower Center for American Studies, and this was the center that was the early repository for the oral histories that form a foundation of our collections, which have now grown. I heard from our resident historian, Keith Thuxon, to almost 3,000, most of them now on high-definition video. But it was the oral histories collected by Stephen Ambrose for his great work on D-Day and citizen soldiers back in the 80s that ultimately led to the idea of this great museum, which is now not any longer the D-Day Museum, although locals continue to refer to it that way, as I do often myself. But Congress changed our name, as you all know, in 2003 to the National World War II Museum for our country, and we are expanding and growing, and within a few months you're going to see steel coming up out of the ground over there by the down ramp on Camp Street for the United States Freedom Pavilion, the Boeing Center, which is going to be the iconic pavilion on this museum campus. As some of you know, I was also involved in the founding of another wonderful center at the University of New Orleans in the 1990s, and that is also closely related to our museum, and that is Center Austria. And Center Austria is the co-sponsor of tonight's event. Tonight's presentation, you'll hear in just a moment as you hear that introduction of our speaker, focuses on the Nazi era, the post-Nazi era. And as all of you know, that Hitler and the Nazi German period is a source of endless fascination for people, not only in this country, but around the world, as is evidenced by the strong showing of people here for this session this evening. So I'd now like to introduce the director of Center Austria, Dr. Gunther Bischoff, who will introduce tonight's speaker. And I would just say before he does that our evening speaker has also got a special connection to the University of New Orleans going back to the 90s. And now a connection especially to this museum as well. So Gunter?
Thank you very much, Dr. Mueller. My name is Günther Bischoff. I teach American diplomatic history at the University of New Orleans. It's a great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker. Before I do that, just a couple special welcomes. A special welcome from friends from Vienna that are here. So the visitors come from far and wide, as we all know. So special welcome to the Leitenfrost family from Vienna. And to my World War II seminar graduate students this spring at UNO. Special welcome to you too. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Dr. Gerald Steinacher, who is from the Tyrol region of Austria. He did his studies at the University of Innsbruck, and while studying at the University of Innsbruck, like many students, like myself, given the intimate relationship between the University of Innsbruck and New Orleans, and a relationship that Dr. Nick Mueller, in fact, started with the summer school almost 40 years ago, I had the pleasure to study with Dr. Ambrose at UNO, and actually Dr. Steinacher, when I started teaching at UNO, fell into my hands when in 1995-96, he came as a student for a year, as so many Innsbruck students do. We will have this fall more than 50 students coming from Innsbruck studying for a semester. Dr. Steinacher was beginning to work on a dissertation on the Operationszone Alpenvorland. We're going to hear a little bit about that. The operational zone Alpine Forelands that after the fall of Italy was sort of a special region that the Nazis organized in the northern Italian region. And he was still groping with the sources, and we did a special course together where I recommended to him that he work on intelligence sources. That is, you can't do this without also looking at OSS sources. And this was a bit of a revelation to him, but then lo and behold, once he delved into the OSS sources, he became a veritable historian of intelligence. And in fact, his dissertation about the South Tyrol region at the end of the war and the OSS's work in that region, which was very important at the end of the war, really became his dissertation. A very notable book. And then he continued to work in that area. He became an archivist after he finished his PhD in the provincial archives of the Bolzano region in northern Italy, the so-called South Tyrol region. The South Tyrol region, as some of you might know, is the region south of the Brenner Pass that, as we like to say in Austria, due to Woodrow Wilson became Italian. So Woodrow Wilson is a president that's still not very much loved in Austria because we lost the South Tyrol as a result of him, we say. So he continued to work in that region as an archivist and then began his work on the book he is going to present to us tonight, which was a Habilitationsschrift at the University of Innsbruck. Habilitationsschrift is that postdoctoral thesis that a person who wants to become a professor in the German-speaking world needs to do. And he finished that Habilitationsschrift and published a book out of it, which is the German version of the book, which was just now published by Oxford University Press in English and is already getting rave reviews in publications like the Wall Street Journal and the Statesman. He has been a fellow at the US Holocaust Museum. This past year, he was a Schumpeter Fellow at Harvard University at the Center for European Studies there. This is one of the most distinguished fellowships that an Austrian can hold in the United States, I think comparable to a Rhodes, if you know what that is. And he is just finishing his Schumpeter in Cambridge, and he has the very good luck of having gotten a tenure-track position at the University of Nebraska. Now, you might say, wow, Nebraska, who would want to teach there? But if you're a historian in this day and age, you're very happy if you get a tenure-track position anywhere, and he is. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Gerald